Welcome everybody. We're here at Building Hope's second Impact Summit and Awards. And we're here with some of our charter leaders, and we are going to talk about the special secret sauce that makes all of their charter schools amazing. And what is some of the secret sauce you've seen in other schools that we'd like to encourage all of you to start practicing. So thank you guys for being here, and let's share the secret recipe. Who'd like to start? What are some of the secret special things that your school, it doesn't even have to be secret, but some of the special things that your schools do that you think have been really beneficial to the program, the students, and how can others do the same?
We created something called a continuous improvement model at our school, and it's like a pie. So it has 4 parts to it, which is building character, community, and instructional coaching and curriculum. What we have been focusing a lot on since we're growing so much is the coaching part, the instructional coaching. So it's a little bit different than regular instructional coaching. We look at it as a sports type coaching. So we observe teachers once a week, and then we give them feedback with one action step. We could videotape the teachers or just give them real-time feedback like a coach. You know, we watch basketball players, athletes, and you see the coaches constantly giving them feedback, and they get better, and they don't move on until they master that skill. So we do the same thing for our teachers. And I think that is one of the special sauces that have really helped our schools, since we have more than one school now, and they're all the same. It's the same culture, you walk into one classroom in one school and you go to another and you see the same exact thing. So it's been really helpful.
And True North is in Miami, and how many schools do you have right
We
now?
have 4 charters right
4
now.
charter schools, right? And since when did you start?
We started in 2015.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. How about anybody else's recipe you'd like to share?
I think ours is community engagement is a huge part in maximizing our partnerships that we have with different organizations in the community.
That's awesome.
Yep. So we've been around for 20 years. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
So
we like to think something is good in the sauce, but yeah.
And your school is?
International Community School in Decatur, Georgia.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a little bit more about the community engagement you guys do.
We have community partners throughout the Decatur, Atlanta area, from United Way to New American Pathways, and these partners come in and provide additional supports, often free of cost. So that looks like after-school tutoring or mental health workshops, or providing resources that we may be lacking in the classroom, so that we're able to kind of keep our budget for academic, operational purposes and still provide those robust programming for our students.
For Life Learning Academy in San Francisco, I think that the secret sauce is many secret sauces, because some folks like barbecue and some folks like honey mustard, and you want to stick with the metaphor, and that we are very conscious of the individualized approach and of meeting students' needs, whatever they are. So for example, we recently had a student transfer in who had left high school and he wanted to come back and get his degree, but he was committed to work, and so we crafted a schedule for him where he was able to work on Fridays and also gave him some online classes. And we were a very small school. We maxed out at 60 students, so we're able to do that again and again, is really respond to the needs of students who are coming and have not been able to find their footing because of often a one-size-fits-all situation in another kind of school or a very much larger school.
One of the things I love about being at Common Academy, K-12 school in the heart of Boston, is this idea of constantly iterating. And I think that's a beautiful secret sauce. We're in year 22. And the school, as it looked in the first few years, and then as it looked 10 years beyond that, and then at year 15, and then now, it's different, right? We're in similar spaces. Some of our staff, like me, we've been there for a long time. But we are constantly looking at things that work okay and trying to make them work better. And so, for example, for a long time we ran our community meeting a certain way, where staff really ran all the pieces, and it was kind of dry, very boring, and sort of dull. And then we engaged our students in being able to be part of a class, basically, where they actually designed and ran our weekly community meeting. And it's not dull and dry and boring. It's actually a really engaging and thoughtful process. So that idea of taking the pieces that are okay, and then thinking about how to keep retooling them is a big piece of what we do that I think is easy to export, and it's just a matter of, do you have the ability, the will to actually tear some of the things down you've already built to rebuild them in a better way.
I think that's a really interesting comment at the end there. I mean, all of it was, but about being willing to tear something down. So to create something new, if you're only building off of everything that's already there, you can't really be innovative, can you? So, and I know that one of the hallmarks of innovation and of creativity is an iterative process. But we don't always get to do that, right? We don't always get to be iterative because we say, well, you're messing with students' lives, right? But if we don't create new things, then we're just going to be stuck with the same. So how do you balance being creative, being adaptive, being iterative, and still serving those things that the students need? How do we try to do new stuff and still maintain?
I think it boils down to kind of making your decision analysis, and if everything you do is rooted in what's in the best interest of students, being able to bring it back to that, then most likely whatever your innovation is going to ultimately benefit your students. So this past year, we piloted a teacher prep program for our community where we were able to partner with another organization and bring in immigrant refugee women to serve as teacher assistants. Ultimately, they're on the pathway to become fully certified teachers. And so, yes, that is definitely, is this the path to go down to find new teacher talent? However, what we were able to do from this program is incorporate 4 additional languages into our community that these women are now able to serve as translators for our families. And then they're also placed in our kindergarten classes, so they're also learning while our students are learning, which is funny. When you're learning a new language, what perfect group to be with than with kindergartners, right? True. And so while that is innovative, it comes with we're learning while we're going through this process, so willing to pivot, but ultimately what we've been able to see is that the benefits have been for our students, but also everyone involved in our community tenfold, just from being willing to take that risk.
And you didn't know all those extra benefits were going to happen when you started this, did you?
No, we just
It
thought
was happy accidents.
Yeah, a lot of happy accidents. We were ultimately trying to figure out how we're going to get ahead of teacher shortage.
Right, which you did solve.
Which we did solve for our community.
And then you had all those extra benefits.
All those extra benefits
which
in the process.
It is so awesome.
What I love that you started with was the concept of asking what is in the best interest of the student, because at GTCHS, I really think that is our secret sauce. We do mastery learning in the classroom, and so the teachers are constantly trying to think of, okay, if the student did not get the concept, what do I do to reteach, what do I do to reassess, while also still progressing in the curriculum. But what that leads to for the students is also this feeling that their teacher knows them, their teacher knows what the weakness is, what the challenge is, and the teacher is not just like, I had one student say, I know that the deadline isn't a gotcha, like they're never out for that end, and I felt that way at my last school. And I just love that because they know that the teachers are on their team and that everyone is there to do for them. And we are willing to do those innovative things. When we had a student that had a crisis, then okay, what can we do within the confines of our compliance measures that can also assist them in finishing their degree?
I want to ask you guys a question because all your schools adapt to the needs of the students. So how do you respond to those kind of folks who would have the outlook of you're doing children a disservice by giving them the grace and the space and not having the gotcha deadlines, like no matter what, you got to get this in, right? So how do you respond to those things?
Well, I think there's a tension there, and I think that you have a twofold, right? Like you could have the bigotry of low expectations and never hold a deadline and never hold them accountable. But we're really believers in, okay, if you're going to have the deadline, did you communicate the deadline? Did you partner with the parents on the deadline? Did you give them those support check-ins along the way on the deadline? There's this huge project. Did you check in after a week and say, oh, you're really behind. What can we do to assist you? So supporting pre and being proactive if you're going to hold the deadline is important. And then understanding things do happen. You know, my mom had a stroke. At that time, I didn't get my epicenter report into my district office. That just didn't happen. And so knowing how to have that grace and balance it and understanding when to hold them and when not to goes back to also knowing your kids and doing what's in the best interest of them and just balancing that tension that can be there.
What's interesting, what you said though, sounds like real world conversations though, you know? So there's grace in that, but also when you're working a job and you have a deadline, you have regular check-ins with your employees like we have with our teachers, and you ask questions like, do you have what you need to get that done? Do you need more time? So it's not really this soft approach, it's actually very practical, and they're having those experiences now at a younger age. So I think it is very relevant to how the real world works.
Teaching them how to ask for the help and that it's okay. I know some students, they feel like if they're gonna they ask for help, that means that they're admitting failure or something. They don't wanna ask because they don't wanna look like they're not doing a good job or they're not getting the right answer. So there are other charter leaders that are out there trying to want to do something innovative. They're struggling with their budget, they're struggling with time, but the biggest thing that they're usually struggling with is fear. What if it doesn't work? Did you guys have anything that you tried that didn't work, or anything that you would say to them to encourage them that it's going to be okay? That it's worth it?
We've tried a million things that haven't worked, and I think that's part of the learning, right? And I think it's an orientation, right? So if you step into that space thinking immediately, no matter what I do, this won't go the way it's intended, then likely that's what's going to happen. If you step in thinking, no matter what happens here, I have some good learning ahead of me, then that's a better way to approach it, right? There is this piece that's about failing forward, right? Folks talk about that, or about running pilots, like small little spaces where you can try something, and if it fails, that's okay, because the whole point is you're trying it, right? And what I appreciate about the adaptive approach, or about iterating, or about tailoring to certain needs, is that if we as school leaders, and then, by connection, our teams, are just understanding that that's part of our process for improvement, then it changes all of those conversations, right? Last thing I'll say is that it doesn't help any of us to just live from fear. It doesn't help our children, it doesn't help us as leaders, it won't help our staff. And so how to really organize so that that's not the way. You're not leading from fear or anxiety or pain, but you're really leading from love, and you're leading from this idea of support for young people and their growth, or support for your team. It's a different orientation.
Absolutely. I had a former colleague that just was really big on saying that you should never make a decision that's based in fear, ever, in any part of your life. And so that just resonated with me, and something that I carry is to not make a decision that's based in that space.
I think another thing that's hard for leaders to do, though, when doing that and when we're trying these things, is to show our own vulnerabilities and to admit when we've failed or admit when something's wrong. So have you had those experiences, and have you shared the failures with the students and used them as learning opportunities? Sometimes that's really hard because you're always being looked to as the one who's supposed to know everything, right? You were the one, you were in charge, you were supposed to know everything at every given moment correctly 100%. So how do we let down that rule, that guard, or should we, right, to show kind of the pain and suffering that's sometimes involved with real progress, right? That it's not all clean, it's messy. Have you had that experience where you shared a little bit of those learnings with your students directly or your staff and said, I didn't do the right thing? And how did that go? Like, how do you do that? How do you do that successfully without them getting nervous and afraid?
I think you call it for what it is. You tell them, if you're operating in a space and you encourage innovation, you have to have room for failure in that process. So your staff has to see that there are wins and there's losses. I think what I've learned is that a lot of our teachers, especially the ones that have not been with us for a while, the newer ones, come to our school with a lot of trauma from their past schools. And so a lot of times they carry with them, I might get in trouble, and I'm like, where do adults operate where they say things like I might get in trouble? I mean, we don't get in trouble here. We learn, So having to kind of course correct that mindset is part of the process. We don't get in trouble, we learn, you know, we're all learning, and myself included, and that helps to kind of remove those barriers.
That's great.
And I think when you fail or make a mistake, you grow, and that's part of education. And I think going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier is that improvement model. Our teachers see, you know, that instructional coaching, but I get coached. Once a month I meet with somebody and he helps me and he helps develop me, and something might not have worked well, and we brainstorm and collaborate. And I think surrounding yourself by people that have strengths in areas that you're weak, you learn from them. So it's all about that learning and growing process.
Yeah, and we had a former teacher that said, feedback equals love. And so we just kind of made that throughout the school. So we ask, where can we improve? We tell them we know we're not perfect. What can we do better? And I ask the teachers that, ask the parents that, we ask the students that, you know, and it's funny because they embrace it in tiny ways. You know, we planned this trip. They kept saying, we want a senior trip, we want a senior trip. We planned something and none of them signed up. And I went, but I went to, you know, I'm in the town hall, I'm meeting with them, and I said, I'm so confused. Y'all said y'all wanted this. None of y'all signed up. And this, I don't want to sound bad, but Ms. Anthony, you didn't ask us where we wanted to go. We don't want to go where you plan to go. And I was like, fair point. Let's do a survey and find out where y'all want to go, you know, which was Orlando to Disney World, you know. So, but yeah, I just think that you have to have the openness to say, you can email me feedback, you can walk in my office and give me feedback. Like, it's going to be taken with love because it's meant to constantly grow and improve.
You know, something we did, and it has helped us tremendously, is that we survey our parents, our teachers, and those that are around us. And we do this mid-year and end of year. And it's great because we get that feedback. They see we're open to the feedback. We look as a team at the trends. And it really helps everybody. It's that culture of error. It's okay if you make a mistake. We're gonna look at the growth from the feedback we're getting, and we make those changes based off of that. If we see those trends, and if it follows our vision and mission of the school too. So
yeah, and that builds your collective efficacy.
It does.
Because they see, oh, she took my feedback and she implemented it.
Right.
You know.
And even then, I think, even when you do that, and it still doesn't work, just sharing the journey and the process and the sort of, you know, we did this thing and here's how we came to that decision. We applied all of this reasoning that seemed to be very good at the time. We still didn't end up where we wanted, but here's what we learned. And I think that that's a lesson that people can really benefit from.
It makes me wonder a lot about how we set ourselves up when we're having conversations about adult learning and the adult culture, and how we have a different conversation often about what kids are doing and kid learning and kid culture, and it's actually not that different. And so when you're teaching, and I think many of us are former teachers, I would always want to tell students, here's where you messed up, here's how you can improve, how can I support you, what do you think you need to do, right? And so why wouldn't we use that same lens and approach to talk to colleagues, or why wouldn't I invite a colleague to say those same things to me, right? That will absolutely make us better. And I think part of it is that idea that once you graduate from school, you're supposed to know all. And so how do we continuously tear that down? I think if we can keep talking about replicating the processes that we think are best for kids with our staff around things like this, it absolutely changes that conversation too. Right? You would never let this fly with your kids. Why are you thinking this is okay to roll into school this way, right? I come into this meeting, staff meeting, 10 minutes late, not even engaging, not paying attention. Why would you think that's okay? So having those real conversations, I think, go a long way.
Okay, so we always want to involve students' voices in our decision making. That's best practice, right? We want to hear what they have to say. We want to modify, make adaptations, but how do you balance that?
Well, I think, like you said, Fran said, and you just said, it is a balance. So I start with, I don't ask them their opinion on things that can't change, because I don't want to waste their time or my time. My students would love to not wear khakis and polos on the college campus, but it identifies them as a high school student on the college campus, which is super important for a lot of different safety reasons, right? And so I think that just like when I was in the classroom and I would ask students, and I would get some really good feedback of what I could have done to better prepare them for a test, but I would also get, we don't want to read homework every night. Well, y'all, we're not going to get through the scope of American Lit if we don't do some outside reading. So I think that acknowledging what you can change, giving them feedback about why it can't change is also important, and then figuring out what you can ask them and where their input can really be used and be valid.
I like that plan, and I wonder about it, right? Because I think we are in these moments where change is happening rapidly, right? And I think about what I was like as a 24-year-old teacher and what our current 24-year-old teachers are like, and how they conceive of the world of work. Even thinking about 20 years ago, what the charter school movement looked like and what we did around teachers and expectations for what teachers should be doing, and how those 12-hour days are now normed to closer to a 9-to-5 or an 8-hour day. And so I wonder about those places where we are even saying now, students, you shouldn't be engaged here, when there are schools and classrooms where they are even engaged in those areas, And so it's making me think differently about some of the challenges. One example at Common Academy is that I sat in on a uniform conversation. It's a very popular thing, probably every year. And our students were talking about why it was important for them to be able to wear hoodies to school. And we have a uniform that is black or khaki pants, that's polo shirts. And I've been holding back this line for hoodies for like 18 years, right? And one of the young people in that space said to me, no disrespect, it was a room of mostly black leaders, educators at the school. No disrespect to y'all, but your definition of black excellence is not my definition of black excellence. It is not what we believe. Our clothes do not define who we are in that way, right? And I had that moment where initially I was like, oh, come on, But my secondary response was, I actually probably should think about that, right? She's trying to tell me something that I need to have my ears open for, right? We do currently have hoodies now. They were able to advocate in a way that they're now linked to their advisory program. And so we have crews, we call them, and each crew designs their own hoodie and wears it as part of their uniform. At any rate, it just makes me wonder, as you all are wrestling with some of those questions in your own schools as well, how do you draw the line, and how do you know when that line needs to move?
That's a great question. And I think that for us, like with the khakis and polos and all that, we actually did. We formed a student committee, and we walked through it with them so that then they were the ambassadors to the other students. And they did get to add certain things and hold the line on other things. And we can have hoodies, but they have our school logo on them. But we did have those conversations with the student committee, because it's not that we didn't want them engaged, it's that we also want to make sure that they know what is doable and what the process is for change, and what change they could actually get an outcome with.
We had what we called Sockgate, I think it was 2010 or something. I don't remember the proper year for it, but our students did not want uniforms, and it was a Montessori school, and we kept talking, it's all student-led, and they're like, this makes no logical sense. We should be able to make these choices ourselves. And so we opened up the board meeting, right, to hear from folks. A lot of parents came and spoke, and there were some students there, but only one student came to speak, and she was 7 or 8 at the time. I think she was 8. And she said, it was kind of like, no disrespect, but she said that that you guys are responding with what's convenient and important to you, because it was about like, it really was. The parents, it was easier for them, frankly. It was just easier for them, right? And this idea how like everybody just looking the same, all of a sudden there's never gonna be any sort of, disparities because we're all wearing the same outfits. I'm like, anyways. So, and she advocated pretty strongly for the students' point of view. And so the progress that we were able to make was at least increase the number of colors so they can have expression. And then, but we got stuck on the socks. But in reality, it was like, having a student to stand up, a young student in front of a group of adults and disagree with them, to me was a sign that we were doing something right. That student felt empowered to speak to power, right, about their truth.
This conversation itself shows how a lot of times you end up in the minutia of clothing choices and all of the different things, when equally valid is when the students really talk about what they need in their learning. And I know when I first came to my school, I was their 4th principal in 4 years. And so the seniors that year met with me and they said, Ms. Anthony, we just feel like you need to know some things from our 4 years experience, and some things that, you know, have been let go by the wayside that when we got here as freshmen we were told would be happening that didn't happen. And we just want you to be able to bring that back, because we feel like our learning was impacted in these ways. And I was sitting there listening to them thinking, I know that y'all think that your learning was impacted, but you being able to articulate this to me and be empowered in that way, I think there's still been some really good stuff going on for y'all.
Right. That is so great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for this conversation, our wild conversation, starting with our special sauce all the way down to socks. But it is important, right? From the minutia to the bigger things, as representatives of what's working, what's not working, and helping others understand that not be afraid, that to be able to make positive change for our students, to be able to adapt, that sometimes, eggs are going to get broken, but we can clean them up. And if we share that process with the students, it makes them a lot less afraid to try new things on their own too. So this has been wonderful, and I hope that everyone that has been able to watch this with us has enjoyed learning from these experts in the field and has a little secret sauce of your own to share. So thank you very much.